Get ready to tweet #emerge18 because I'm so pleased to welcome on stage Melissa Barnes. She's the Managing Director of Latin America and Canada for Twitter. Welcome, Melissa.
Hi, everyone. So when we were talking about this session, we were brainstorming all kinds of things that we thought we could speak to you about that might be interesting. And I was thinking about sort of the questions I get in general when I go and meet with people these days. And they sort of say, it's an interesting time right now when you look at marketing. And I say, yeah, it is, but I actually think it's exciting. And I've been at Twitter for a little over 6 years now. And what's been interesting is, especially at the beginning, we would go in and meet with brands, meet with agencies, and there was this conversation happening around the table where you could see that marketers were a little bit disconcerted by the way in which time and the speed of time on Twitter especially was making them nervous. It wasn't how they planned. And you could watch a room and you could see the people who would be leaning in and asking questions and really want to understand this. And you would see the people who would sort of be sitting back and saying, that's just not how we do it. And what we saw over the years is that the people who'd been leaning in and asking questions and excited about sort of this new time, those were the people who were winning. Those were the people who were sort of moving up because they were the ones who were trying and testing and experimenting and trying and ultimately figuring out what worked. And so this idea of embracing change has probably been one of the greatest learnings that I've had in my entire career because you don't have a choice, is the reality. So I want to talk about time in a different way today, which is that we are in different times. What I mean by that is that things like this. If you would have asked me a few years ago, would we have seen Brazil, the largest country in Latin America, very popular leader, would we have seen him get arrested and taken out of office? Probably would have said no. Marielle Presente, I don't know if many of you know this story, but what's been interesting about this was a Brazilian politician. She was murdered, and this would have been a local story 10 years ago, most likely. Maybe headlines for a day. What we saw on Twitter is that this was a story that traveled around the world. In 2 days, we saw 3 million tweets in 54 countries about Marielle Presente. Marielle is here. The finance minister of Brazil is on Twitter. He only recently stepped down, not off of Twitter, but stepped down from his role because he's running for office. But the idea that the finance minister of a country is using this real-time platform to communicate, you wouldn't have seen that a few years ago. This is the president of a major retailer. She uses Twitter for thought leadership and to talk about her business, but to also talk about diversity and inclusion and things that are important to her. And then here in Miami, we have the mayor who's on Twitter. And there's just an expectation that you have to be available if you're in public service. You have to be responsive. You have to be there for your constituents. We have a couple of big elections happening this year in the region. Mexico first. And the other night, we broadcast the election live. We weren't the only platform to do that. Actually, Facebook and Google did it as well. But if you looked at their broadcast, in the top right corner, the thing that they were counting was tweets. Because if people are talking about it on Twitter, then it's a big story. And the things that they're talking about on Twitter tell you what to report if you're a reporter. The other thing that was interesting that I think represents different times about this is if you remember watching debates when you were growing up, I know I did, you were in your TV room with your family and you were all sort of sharing your point of view, but you didn't necessarily have access to other points of view. What we see when we look at the experience that we give to people is as they're following a debate, now you're seeing the most interesting commentary associated with that debate. It isn't just who you follow. We've specifically designed the experience so that we can share both sides, so that we can expose people to other points of view. And what I will tell you as an individual, what was interesting to me is that while I would like to think I'm open-minded and I follow both sides, inevitably when I'm following a debate on Twitter, I see a different perspective. And usually gets my attention when the point is made really well. Let's talk about something else though, when we talk about different times. Many of you know there was an earthquake in 1985 in Mexico, September 19th. As we saw last year, when they did an earthquake drill that morning at 11:30, nobody expected that there would be another earthquake that afternoon. This is a tweet from Diego Luna, and he says, you could see people running to the cloud of dust to help those trapped, rather than those running from it. And this basically really captures the role that we see social media play in all of this. What we saw is that social media was the way of organizing the response. So the first series of tweets were about people saying, I need help. Can you help me find shelter? The next series of tweets were, I'm offering help. This is actually a tweet from the Japan embassy, sort of talking about their work and what they're doing to support Mexico. And then the next series was about help is needed. How do we organize? Would you like to volunteer? Here's how you donate. Those were the waves that we saw. And we saw other people, this is local celebrities sort of saying, pay attention to Mexico, support Mexico. This is Frida. Frida became a celebrity during the earthquake recovery and response. She's a government employee, I learned. We actually tried to get her on stage today, but because she's a government employee, she's not allowed to do public speaking. Frida became so popular that we created a Twitter emoji around it. So when people tweeted, Todos somos Frida, you saw the little dog icon, and this was a way to sort of keep the conversation happening after the event. Sometimes events happen, and people care deeply about them for the first 24 hours, and then it goes away. And so how do we keep attention on Mexico and support for Mexico? And this is a way to sort of help that conversation that we found was really successful. So when we look at sort of conversations and the types of things people talk about, again, different times, everyone was very excited about Coco. In fact, the movie studios have long been among our strongest brand partners on the platform because what they know is that if you build anticipation for your event, for your movie release, you're going to have a better release. So it was interesting to see the conversation around Coco, and in this instance, the creators really wanted to participate in that. So this is Lee Ulrich, and he's tweeting events that are surrounding the premiere. He's also responding to people. So an early conversation that started around Coco was the fact that they were releasing it during Thanksgiving and not on Halloween when it's about Dia de los Muertos. They sort of questioned that makes sense. And the point from Lee was, this is a movie about family. And when we look at holidays, Thanksgiving really represents that, hence Thanksgiving. He's also sort of saying thank you to people. And so Coco was a huge success, and it was a success for a lot of reasons. It's a great movie, highly recommend it, but Twitter was a place where people celebrated it, where you could be part of that bigger audience, sort of talking about what it was to see the movie. I want to talk about this idea of relevance, though. So we talk about different times, exciting times, and usually we're talking about it with Twitter in the sense of real time, right? It's about seconds, it's about minutes, and that's the hard part. What's really interesting when you think about relevance and where we are now is it's not just about time. When you look at circumstances and what people are interested in, that's changed too. And if you're an advertiser, relevance matters. So I love this quote, ads are not the problem, irrelevant ads are the problem. And so if you are a marketer, you have to be paying attention and understand that we really are in different times. So I don't know how many of you watched the Golden Globes or were at the Golden Globes. Unfortunately, I couldn't make it that night. So Like a lot of people, I was home and watching and tweeting, and I want to show you a brief clip from the famous Oprah speech.
For too long, women have not been heard or believed if they dared to speak their truth to the power of those men. But their time is up. Their time is up. Their time is up.
And as Shonda Rhimes says, and we went to church. I don't show this clip with the tweets to show you that Twitter and TV work together. I'm not showing it to show you that Twitter heightens the emotional intensity of a moment by 30%. It does, but that's not the point of this. The point of this is that we can't help but acknowledge the things that people are talking about are bigger and more real issues. And people are looking for brands that are doing real things. CES was right after this. And I remember walking sort of the floors in Las Vegas and meeting with all these marketers and all these agency leads. And it was just a very common part of the conversation about what you as a brand were going to do in this new world, where this is a real issue and people are talking about it. And it's not just in the US, it's everywhere. This is a tweet from Mexico. It's from a young woman there talking about Me Too. Me Too is actually a hashtag that started on Twitter. And what she's saying here is, I sort of question, is this normal? Did I cause it? Did I give the wrong idea? Sort of a sentiment that women all over the world were saying and tweeting. We know this because this is a heat map of Twitter and people talking about Me Too. And what we saw with this moment, which continues, is that it's opened the doors to have a bigger conversation in a lot of different languages from a lot of different people. This is a campaign from Brazil that was started by some female sportscasters there, and they're all rallying around the idea of let her do her job.
Aconteceu comigo. Muita cerveja voando.
Recentemente, também aconteceu comigo.
Já aconteceu com todas nós.
Vasco vence do Corinthians?
E não dá mais para acontecer.
Somos mulheres e profissionais.
Só queremos trabalhar em paz.
O esporte também é lugar nosso.
Eu quero respeito.
Respeite a nossa voz e as nossas escolhas.
Chega de desconfiança.
Chega de diferenciação.
Ei, você aí.
Chegou a hora de se importar.
A omissão também machuca.
E não é só machismo, é desrespeitoso, é nojento, é ofensivo,
É uma violência. Chega.
deixa ela trabalhar.
Deixa ela trabalhar.
Deixa ela trabalhar.
Deixa ela trabalhar.
Deixa ela trabalhar. This is from the football clubs within the market sort of showing support for this, saying we have to change the way we treat these people. They are changing their policy because people are speaking up and speaking out about that. This matters. We're seeing brands try to figure this out. So if you think about, and you hate to sort of throw stones, but if you think about advertisers where sometimes maybe they haven't always been as supportive for females, beer advertisers maybe fit within that category. And so this is something that Skoll did, where they basically on International Women's Day asked for ideas from women for different kinds of advertising campaigns. Sort of an open brief. Give us your ideas. How would you market our product? Energy drink, TNT, or TNT energy drink rather. They worked with a rapper named Taïd in Brazil to highlight different issues, different ways in which people are discriminated against, and all sort of about this lifestyle and what it means to strive and be better and what that looks like. I'm going to just show you a portion of what the final creative looked like for that.
não dimensionava os riscos de ser pioneiro no Brasil.
Eu sei bem o que é perder a conexão com tudo o que fazia sentido para mim.
A pressão é diária.
A gente batalha para que se enxergue beleza nas diferenças.
Com isso, inspirar outras pessoas.
So you get some of the idea of what that campaign stood for. Again, like getting closer to issues, and sometimes sticky issues. So if you were to ask me, would I think that the National Geographic Society would ever partner with an oil company? I don't know that I would have said yes to that. But actually, Petrobras, which is an oil company in Brazil, has started a program with National Geographic highlighting ways to preserve the earth and why it's important and different things that they are trying to do together to raise awareness. Again, an unlikely partnership, but they're trying to be better and do more. Stella Artois, they're working with water.org. For every glass that you buy, Stella sort of has the iconic glass, they will provide clean water to a family for 5 years. One glass, 5 years. That's pretty meaningful. MasterCard in Mexico just announced a huge initiative where over the next 2 years, they're going to be giving away millions of free meals to families. They're trying to fight the hunger crisis. They brought together Neymar and Messi. Those are, again, like two names you don't always see coming together, working together. But what is interesting about this is they want to make it real. Like, yes, the World Cup is happening this year, and there's all kinds of things that you could do with these two athletes, these incredible athletes. But how do you do something real? So every time they score, they're going to give away 10,000 free meals. Again, big goals, 10 million meals, something real. And I think that's, if there's one thing you could take from all of this, is that we're in exciting times, yes, different times, yes, but how you participate as a brand has to be real. If you do something for one day, it might just look opportunistic. But if you do something that is meaningful, that you're committed to, that you're going to see through for maybe years, then that resonates with people. So the last example I want to talk about is an individual. So earlier this week, which I guess would be Monday, somebody asked me if I could give advice to women, what advice would I give? And I asked instead, rather, could I give advice to men? Because I think women get a lot of advice. And I know a lot of great men who are doing great work, and I know a lot of great men who would actually like to do more and find a way to support this. And so I talk often about Antonio Lucio. Antonio is the CMO of HP. Before that, he was the CMO of Visa, and he's been in the role for about 3 years. And we were meeting maybe like in the first year, and I was sort of asking him about his leadership team and how it's going, and he said, you know, there's one thing that I really have to fix, which is diversity. At the manager level, I have about 50% male-female, but at the senior level, it's more like 10% of my senior leaders are female, and I have to change that. So we met a year later, and they were 50-50 at the top. Not because it's the fair thing to do, but because Antonio believes that actually that will be better for business to have more diversity. And there's been scientific studies that show this, that prove this out. The more diverse your team, the better you perform. But he didn't want to just stop there within his own team. He also knows he has a lot of power as the CMO of one of the largest brands in the world. And so he went to his agencies and he said, you have a year to make significant change. And he gave them a report card. And he looked at not just male, female, but overall diversity. And within 1 year, and he gave them a year because he said, that's how long it took me to do it. So if I can do it in a year, you can do it in a year. And at the end of the year, the senior leadership of his agencies had moved to 50-50, male, female. Still work to be done on the diversity piece. There still aren't enough people of color calling on his business, creating his campaigns, but it's a key focus area. And his point is, you can't make movement on things you don't measure. So the goal for him is to create better ads for more people so that people want HP products. They support that brand. Which brings me back to this point about relevance. No brand can afford to lose relevance. We found it to be the chief driver of growth. Relevance is what keeps brands strong, healthy, and better prepared to win in the future. So you go back to change and this idea of change and the fact that we are in interesting, different times. What's interesting at Twitter is we're probably right at the center of it when you look at where thoughts are being expressed, where change is happening, movements are being accelerated. And so what we're seeing from brands is those that are leaning into it, those that are figuring this out and figuring out their role in this are the ones who are winning. Thank you.